college money?
Ms. Childs and I will follow up on.
Okay, I was just curious.
Between the
I
two
know
of us,
if
we'll
you
get the
take more
answer
than
to you.
two, there's, in a year, there's some,
It used
there's
to
financial.
offset your THEC,
Yeah,
Tennessee Higher Education Commission
Right.
eligible funds,
right.
and I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay, I just didn't know with the increase if it, potentially reduced anything. It's just something to be aware of. I think it's great, getting them done. I just was curious as to long-term financially, how they were paying for it.
I'd make an acknowledgement for anybody that may be watching this video after the fact. We did have some technical difficulties. We are now live and streaming. If anybody watched the first, probably, or was trying to watch the first 15 minutes or so, were taken up by a delightful presentation from students at both schools. It likely wouldn't have been picked up on the mics. Anyway, we did have just the TLN representative update, so I apologize for anybody watching this after the fact that those things were not part of the live stream.
So we are currently in the report section of our agenda, and I believe that concludes the TLN report. So Dr. Horrell will move to your report.
Yes, and I promise I didn't get the live stream set up just in time for my report. That was not my intention. I would have done that. All right, I wanted to say, obviously we have just come back to school after a long weekend with a couple of days out of school. I just want to thank everybody's cooperation, both in the school system and administration. Certainly the school board, the community, parents, for understanding the situation. I think it was a very obvious situation this time. Some calls are difficult. This was pretty obviously impending weather, and as it turns out, there was quite a bit of damage done in terms of mainly impacting people's power, and certainly, like everybody else, many members of our staff. I did want to thank, we like to give credit where credit was due. I want to thank the leadership and staff of MLGW, who came in and made sure that we had power restored at the middle school in particular, where we had been out for several days. They prioritized that late in the game to make sure that we could have school today and had a smooth start of school today. The other big news really for the school system, something that the board had initiated some time ago, but we did close on another piece of property that would be owned by the school system. This is about a 23-acre site that we anticipate using as a future elementary school. The future has not been determined as far as when that would be, certainly, but we do now own two pieces of property that would be suitable for construction of additional education facilities in the future. Land has been going quick, as everybody knows, and I think this board widely invested the resources and the time into making sure that we had the space to build out when we need to. So that's been exciting. I did want to give, speaking of exciting, as you know, we monitor the COVID-19 numbers very carefully. And in terms of benchmarking, the student numbers for the past 4 weeks, so the total student combined numbers for the past 4 weeks, and the last number was our numbers from Wednesday, were 63, 70, 44, 16. So I know we're seeing this across the state and nationally, but it is good to see it here as well, and that we're not an exception right now. So those were the COVID cases starting January 13th. I did want to note, and in fact, we have one of our school nurses here today, Nurse Raina from the middle school, and we have Nurse Bellamy at the elementary school, and Blake Warren. We noted just today that they have, I'll say single-handedly, I'll say triple-handedly, I guess, implemented the testing grant that we received. It was federal money that was offered from the state, and we have made COVID testing available to our students and staff really for the whole year, but it got very hairy coming back from Christmas break, and their hard work and dedication in squeezing that in addition to their regular workload, I think was a huge advantage to our students and our staff. So thank you to everybody involved in that. Did want to note, currently 4-year plans are being developed for the high school grades, which is another step forward, and we have staff that are working with the students and with the parents to make sure that those plans are understood. We extended the deadline a little bit to account for the days off of school, and then in addition to that, we have made our first several hires of people that will focus primarily on work at in the high school grades. So we are definitely moving toward that goal of the August edition of 9th grade at Lakeland Prep. I wanted to note, I've said before, I've served on one of the subcommittees for the review of the statewide education funding formula. We have completed our phase of the work, and that work, those recommendations from the statewide effort are now with the state steering committee. I'll just be very honest. We need additional information before I could make any sort of informed opinion on whether or not it's something, very frankly, that I feel like the school board and I would support. So that word is still out. There's a lot of questions that are unanswered. We do know the governor has talked about some additional money invested in education, but we don't quite have the details on what that would look like as it applies to our specific situation. So we'll keep monitoring that, obviously, as we go. Next week will be very busy for the school board and for me. We'll start with the TSBA Legislative and Learning Institute at the start of next week. I'll actually come back for a night and then go back to Nashville for the National Association of American School Administrators National Education Conference, which will be the second half of the week and then through the weekend, just for everybody's information. Lots of things continue to happen, cool things at the middle school. We had more than 60 students come out to express interest in track and field. We've got the cheer team that's headed to nationals next week. If you didn't see it on Facebook, the girls had a record-setting basketball season. The boys won their play-in game to make it into the district tournament and then lost in the district tournament, but everybody's making advances there. I probably shouldn't have gotten started because there's so many great things going on. Soccer tryouts are happening now. Baseball tryouts have wrapped up, and got a nice big team for baseball, so lots of cool things happening in the schools. I did want to notice our school support organization training that we had for all of the officers, the sponsors, school leadership, bookkeepers, school principals was really, I feel like, a big success. It was extremely well attended. Have gotten some things cleared up that I think is going to serve the school system and provide some clarity and consistency moving forward as we continue to add booster clubs. We'll add a couple more tonight, board willing. So it's something we're very fortunate to have the huge amount of parent involvement that we have in Lakeland school system. And then finally, work continues on the progress on the high school. The thought is, we've had lots of conversations about timetables. The thought is that furniture move-in, as far as loose furniture, would be mid-June based on the estimates from the contractors. That's what they're saying right now. That does give us a little wiggle room, and that's all contingent on getting those approvals from the fire marshal that says we can take occupancy. But that's after a very thorough review of the schedule, so we feel good about that as well. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for the superintendent and his report? Ms. Harrison?
Can you just update, is there any update on the track? Is it still on track?
You were going to try to say that.
Or are we, is that looking like
Yes.
it's a go for that time frame?
And you may notice if you drive through, they've done a lot of the prep work and continue to do prep work, but the actual track surface, which is the most expensive and really critical part for both the longevity of the track and student safety, is going to be, right now the plan is that it be poured in April, and when the temperature's a little more stable, and then there'll be some cure time there as well.
Other questions for the superintendent? Mr. Burnett?
Dr. Roll, I apologize for not following up with you before tonight, but we did talk recently about volunteers in the community that do work for the school system. Haven't had a chance to follow up, but just your thoughts. Where do you think we should go with that so far?
I think it's a great idea. We attended a city event that was similar, and I know we had the conversation then that it would be a good opportunity to recognize our own volunteers. Obviously, it would take some doing to make that happen, but at the board meeting, and
Be a commitment of funds from the board to support something like that.
That would be involved as well. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And I apologize for not saying that earlier
That's
today.
no problem. No problem.
Any other questions or comments on the superintendent report? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is the financial summaries. We have the December and the January financial summaries. The way the meetings hit, sometimes we play a little catch-up. So we've got both December and January. We don't have any issues to report other than there is a budget amendment. I can talk through the adjustment to the budget there, but there's no significant issues there that I'm aware of.
Any questions on the financial report? Ms. Harrison?
I haven't asked in probably at least a year, so I'll just ask about, and you can send me the data or send the data to the board later, but MLG&W, like how, I know we did some improvements for like, what do you call it, efficiency and things like that. I was just curious kind of how those, things like that over the long run.
Absolutely. I do have that data. I'm not prepared right now to speak on it, but I will definitely get it to you. We do study that, and I'll call out Amanda Kelly, who's our accounting clerk. She does an excellent job of tracking the bill details every single month, and it is easy to look at it and see kind of where things are trending both month to month and year to year. We are obviously looking in depth at the athletic annex bills as well, as we do invoice the city for a portion of those bills, so they get an even finer tooth comb, I guess, to make sure we're requesting the right things.
Any other comments or questions on the financial report?
This is just with all the excitement. Does anybody have a pen? Is there another pen out there that I could? An extra?
Yeah, have a
What
whole
kind of pen?
Would you like a TSBA pen?
Just straight down. I'll take this. You got another one? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. All right, any other questions? We'll move over to the next agenda item, and the next agenda item is approval of the agenda.
Are there any additions or changes anyone would like to make to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll consider the agenda approved. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda. We did not have a work session, so there's no items currently on the consent agenda.
Next item.
Next item, as we move into the discussion items, is the second of our series of data presentations from Mr. Adler.
Dr. Horrell.
I do have one question about the agenda.
Oh, thank you. You did not miss it. The
Okay.
protected reading list.
If it's not on the agenda.
It's there. We need to go back and add that. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to add the protected.
I have a motion from Ms. Harrison to add the proposed protected reading list for 21-22. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Would anyone like to discuss the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. And just for the record, for clarification purposes, all we've done is add this item to our agenda. We will speak to it later as the meeting goes on.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I appreciate that. And now, we will hand things over to Mr. Adler. He is our Director of Accountability, Assessment, and Data. And one of the things he spent a lot of his time doing is implementing and then analyzing the results from Case 21. And he can review a little bit what Case 21 is. But he's going to come on up to the mic and speak into it, and then let me know when he wants me to change slides.
Welcome, Mr. Adler.
Welcome.
No student act, and I'm not going to sing a song for you. We appreciate you all learning as you go. Carl did allude, this is the second benchmark assessment results, and it's going to be a lot. Okay, good.
We're all learning. It's okay.
Hey, I'm glad, because I was going to be very awkward all the way
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Observation. This is our second benchmark, and there's a few caveats that I do want to get into the actual data. I went through all the reports that were given to teachers for the first benchmark. I did not include that in this presentation because this is just nuts and bolts of data and where we are progressing through the year. So you can go to the next slide, Dr. Wolf. Just to review, our second benchmark was given during January 6th through the 14th. Our third will be the beginning of March. This leads to the first caveat. Our first benchmark was at the end of October, and teachers really didn't even get data until the middle of November. They've had about 6 weeks of instruction between the first benchmark and the second benchmark, which is not ideal. In a typical year, and hopefully next year will be a typical year, we would do a first benchmark at the end of September, early October. A second benchmark would be in early December, and then the third would be in March. So there's more of a time gap in between. So there's more instruction, and there's more response to the standards that people are missing. So keep that in the back of your mind as we go and look into the data.
Can I add one more thing,
Yes,
Mr. Adler? If you'll notice the dates January 6th through 14th, and you don't have to think back much, you'll also know that was a time of significant disruption in terms of.
I was going to go.
I apologize, Mr. Adler. Go ahead.
He does that to me all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, a couple other things, and to Dr. Horrell's point. That was right after winter break, and there was an uptick in teachers' illness, there was an uptick in student illness. If the teachers are not in the classroom, and even in December, if the teachers are not in the classroom, the instruction by a substitute is not the same instruction that a certified teacher is giving, so we have to take that into account. The other thing is January 6th, we came back to school on January 3rd. Ideally, testing right after a break is usually not the ideal time frame to test students to see where they are in terms of mastering standards. So keep all those things in mind when we look at the data. Again, the case benchmark data, and this is really for the public, is to make sure we are benchmarking our students as they progress through the year, as we go towards TCAP, which will be in mid-April and early May. The case content areas that were tested for this benchmark was all K-8. The first benchmark was 1-8. They added kindergarten as well. For the state testing, kindergarten and first grade is not tested, as you know, but it's giving us some data to see where our kids are performing early on in very early grades. And then the content area tested for benchmark 2. For grades K1 and 2, it was just ELA and math only. For grade 2, the state test is ELA and math only, so that mirrors that. Grades 3 through 8 was all 4 content areas, ELA, math, science, and social studies, and that was all paper-based. Another change for this benchmark was Algebra 1 is going to be online because that's considered an EOC test. The state, that's all online testing. We did online testing for benchmark to mirror that to see if our kids are performing the same online as they would with paper and pencil. So, next slide, Dr. Roll. Going into the data, the sequence of data is the same as it was before. English language arts, followed by math, followed by science, and then social studies. The math and ELA, of course, are the big accountability subjects. The others are for data purposes only, and really for 3 through 8 for science and social studies. And 6 through 8 for social studies, I'm sorry. Okay. If you can, well, the way this table, again, just to review, the first column is our first benchmark and how our kids did on the first benchmark. The second column is how they did on the second benchmark. The third is in a normal year of TCAP 18-19, and then the 2021 TCAP was the COVID year where we were in school 3 days a week, 2 days at home, a variety of virtual, variety of in-person instruction and virtual, so it was kind of a different year where learning loss did happen. And then the last column is the difference between 2021 TCAP and the second benchmark to see if we're making gains. In all the data, the teachers are working extremely hard. The kids are working hard when they're in school. They're looking at the data. They're comparing it. They're comparing classes, teachers, teach one class to another in PLCs. So these teachers are working very hard. There are gains throughout all the data, but there's also some losses, and there's no change in some cases. But I get, with all those caveats that I mentioned in the very beginning, some areas are going to be stronger than others, and we really hope that the March assessment will be a good predictor, and then when the TCAP data comes back, we'll compare that with the March predictor and see if it's actually on point. So really concentrate on second grade ELA, since that's a state tested subject. They have increased by 5% from the 21 TCAP, so they're making progress. Third grade is up by 7%, and fourth grade is up by 1%, all progress. So those are all positive gains, which I really want to commend those LES teachers for making those positive gains under the conditions, again, that I previously mentioned. Next slide. Middle school with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, there was really no change with 5th and 6th. The 7th grade didn't really change. That 1% is probably negligible in terms of if you look at a statistical analysis, which I did not do. And then 8th grade is making progress, but we're still not to where 8th graders should be in terms, 43% is not what we want to go home bragging about in terms of on track and proficiency, but they are making progress, which is the key, and they're not losing much ground with the other grades as well. Okay, Dr. Roll. Math. Kindergarten, 77% on track and mastered for proficiency rating, and that's kindergarten. These kids have never taken a test. They had their teachers had to bubble the test, and the test was read to them, and, you know, seeing that number was actually remarkable. But skipping down to tested grades, second, third, and fourth. Second grade, again, there is no rhyme or reason why that was such a big dip, but they did take a dip. And again, it could have been due to illnesses, it could have been due to loss of teacher instruction, it could have been, but they care about that data. Like, the teachers have got together with instructional facilitator Kim Lewis and tried to work through their data through their PLCs, and they're really owning it to figure out how they can make those gains. There was a dip in third and fourth grade as well, but not as significant by any means. You look at fifth grade, that's a whopping increase. They increased by 19% from where they were in 21 TCAP. They decreased a little bit from the first benchmark to the second benchmark. But when you compare the second benchmark to the 2021 TCAP, they're making significant gains, which is great. In sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, they did lose some ground, again, with those caveats. And Algebra 1 is just rocking it. They're increased by 2% from where they were in 2021, and this was also online. So that's a good indication that the standards are being met, and the kids are mastering those standards in the realm of how they're going to be tested, which is important to understand, especially if they're this high, this soon, and it only gets better with review for all the grades. Science, again, there was no science test in 18-19. In 2021, you can see those results. Third through eighth, they're not double-digit gains, they're not double-digit losses. In some cases, there's no change whatsoever yet. But also, like, the 7% gain with eighth grade is great. Fifth grade, an 8% gain for right now in that short period of time is significant. And in some cases, there are, I don't want to call them losses, but they're just not on track yet. And I guess that is the growth mindset, is that yet. The teachers, the one good thing about CASE is it's a snapshot of how kids are doing. And the teachers can use that data to get those kids to where they want to be come time for April, okay? This is the last for social studies. Again, for third through fifth, it is not state tested. For sixth through eighth, there are gains on 2 out of the 3 grades. And again, not a significant loss with seventh grade as well. And again, CASE being given right after the winter break, also 6 weeks of instruction. We have more instruction going into March, and then we can really dissect it when we come back from spring break, and the teachers can hit the ground running for the 4 weeks leading up to TCAP. So, you have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
So, just for clarity, this is based on the standards that should have been taught to this point, not the standards for the whole year.
That's a great question. For ELA, it's standards, it's cumulative, it's comprehensive for the whole year. What they should be learning from beginning to end. For the other subjects, math, science, and ELA, it's quarter 1 standards plus some more, but not the whole year. Now, the third benchmark will be the whole year of what they should know. So thank you for clarifying that.
Childs.
I had 2 questions. So the first one is the way you have your grid set up, you're comparing like all the years in, say, 8th grade, right? Right. So the 8th grade students, those are the ones who had the 7th grade 2021 scores.
Correct.
Okay. So, and then secondly, you mentioned Algebra 1 being online. Is that always online? Has that been like that for a while? No,
last year was paper. They moved all EOC tests to online for this year.
So this year is the first time.
Correct.
Mr. Burton, sorry.
The kids are doing great, you know, according to CASE.
I'm not worried about that. I just hope there's not a failure like when they put TCAP online or 10 Ready.
That would never happen.
I'm more concerned about, like, y'all doing all the work and then something happening with the test when it's the first year they make a significant change.
I remember very distinctly.
I'm sure you do. So yes. Okay, I was just curious because I didn't think it was an online test.
Burnett.
And thank you again, Mr. Adler. I appreciate seeing this and getting these pieces. Add on to what Ms. Child said, I had the same question. What I would like to also see is, since this is static to the grade, I'd like to see that cohort tracking. That especially some of these subjects, most of these subjects are scaffolded. So did a learning loss in a previous year impact the next year's?
Right.
So I just would be interested in seeing that as well.
And we can do that as a grade level as a whole, but of course, we know that there's new kids that come in, new kids and students that leave, so it would still be, not exactly apples to apples, but it would be better than apples to oranges is what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, both ways introduce some
Well,
noise into the data.
Correct.
Yeah, I think both, because, I mean, it's helpful to see this too, just to see like, how is this grade
the grade level
performing,
doing?
with the teacher group, but then also I think it would be helpful, especially because the pandemic has been so challenging. So, it is this a particular cohort had, for some of them only had 3 days of instruction last year, depending on, watching that cohort go through. So I think it would be helpful, to Mr. Burnett's point, to have both charts. So, I mean, like, don't get rid of that, because that's helpful too, to see like how the grade band, those group of teachers do with those students. But it would be nice to see the cohorts, just because, especially all the challenges. But you're right, there's certainly gonna be changes in some students.
And speaking of that, like, just as a parent, and you guys are all parents as well, I see it in my own child. The learning loss is real. The motivation for school is real. Now, he's a 12-year-old adolescent boy, but, it's the change of how school was. He hasn't had a normal year since 3rd grade. 4th grade was cut short, 5th grade was different, 6th grade is just now getting back to being normal again. So, just as a parent, and this is really for all the parents that are out there, don't be discouraged about students' data. Individual reports have gone home from both schools. It is just snapshots to help the students get back on track. It's not that they're way off and that they're gonna be on track forever. It's just getting through these last few years, and however many more years we have to get through this is where the real difference was made.
Thomas.
So how well aligned is Case 21 formative types with TCAP
It's
test types?
almost identical.
Almost identical. And then for the younger grades, for K and 1, is it what they're gonna see? There's still a lot of read aloud with K and 1?
With a lot of read aloud with
Yeah.
K and 1. Really, for kindergarten and 1st grade is really just to get an idea of how they're
Right.
learning and based on their standards. Because I don't even know how CASE uses that to create project the percentage of on track and mastery, because they have no test.
Right.
So what do they consider being on track and mastery, and what are the cut scores there? I just haven't got that deep into it yet.
So that's this about where they are, they're tested on where they are in social studies and science, but then when they take the March one, it's the whole
It should be
thing.
the standards, yeah, that will be tested on TCAP.
Are there questions for Mr. Adler? Hearing none?
And
Mr. Adler?
one more comment to that, Ms. Thomas, is that even though that will be cumulative, the standards, that will affect the data too, because some standards may not have been taught yet.
Right, that's what I was thinking too.
But at least the teachers will have what's not been taught compared to what's been taught and what the kids are missing, or if they got lucky on the ones that haven't been taught yet, or if they are learning enough skills to answer the questions that haven't been taught. We'll see that as well.
Well, and so I think the one big takeaway, because Case 21's new for everybody, so for parents, it's a teacher tool to try to help your children. So don't take the numbers as any kind of measure of your child's capabilities. Just know that your teachers are looking at the data and saying, I need to hit this standard harder, we need to go back and cover this again. And that's where growth happens.
And the subgroups are also shared with the teachers too. So our SPED teachers they have their data, our APEX teachers have their data, our EL teachers have their data, so they can work with their individual cohorts of students as well and see how they're progressing.
And then there's a whole another 4 weeks, as you said, after the March one, there's a whole another 4 weeks of instruction before TCAP gets
That
here.
is correct.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Adler? Hearing none. Thank you as always, very
Thank you, Mr.
informative. Appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you.
Are you gonna sing now?
Yeah, you want the song now? You took away the piano.
He can play the piano. He
I
can
know,
play the
that's true,
piano,
that's
yeah.
true.
And we did get a new family edition this week. I'm a new dad of a baby boxer. So, a little family edition, join the family.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank you, I appreciate that.
congratulations.
Thank you, have a good night, y'all.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Great job.
Coral, before we move on, I'd kind of like to get your reaction to this data.
Sure. It's, I think Mr. Adler did a good job summing it up. I do want to point out again that the 18-19 versus the 2021, there was also a change in test vendors during that time. So there are always obviously things that impact the data that we get. Our goal and our approach is to take the data that we have and really just identify those strengths and weaknesses. And my philosophy's always been, as long as you keep trying to make everybody better at what they are, the things tend to work out. As far as, psychometrics, some of those, like where there's a 17%, drop or those
Right.
kind of things, I have a hard time. That's the case. I think in some cases, the ones that are much higher would probably be more accurate. It's harder to get higher. It's easier to have a bad day and not do well, or a series of bad days, or people having bad days. I'd say, assuming that the data is, if we were to say that the data is accurate right now, I'd say it's not where we want to be. We had some of the highest scores in the state a couple of years ago, or the last year they tested pre-COVID. So of the scores would make me think, like Mr. Adler said, there's some learning loss. To address it, we spent a lot of time, focusing on social and emotional care last year and making sure kids were in school and had all the things that they need. And what I am confident about is that having this data is another opportunity for the teachers who are very much interested in getting the students back to where they were to do so. So for me, that's the most exciting part about the data, is that we have it and it's actionable. And I have no doubt, just from what I'm seeing and hearing, and the PLCs are going, professional learning communities are, I believe, have more tools, more resources, more inspiration, more motivation this year really than we ever have. I'm optimistic. I'd say overall, despite the dips that we see in some cases, the data makes me optimistic that already the teachers are taking advantage of it and using it. Obviously very interested to see how that third one comes out. And then, as we know, the day, it all comes down to how does it shake out statewide. There are years where, even with the same vendor and without COVID, everybody's scores kind of relative to each other go down. So I think it's very, very helpful. I'm certainly not discouraged by it. Also, presents opportunities, as we'd say, to just get better.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adler, as well. We will move to the next item, Dr. Horrell.
Absolutely. The next item is the approval of minutes from the special call meeting on January 11th.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of policy 4.606. This is a new policy, so this is first reading on graduation activities.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, so this is obviously, we're still some time ahead, but figured out we'd go ahead and start knocking out some of these high school policies relating to graduation activities. Much of this is boilerplate from state law. There's some things at the end that says that students will be recognized for the following achievements. Those are actually all in state law, so those aren't things that were arbitrarily chosen. We did add some things by studying both our own experience, those of us that have high school experience with graduates, and then looking at some other policies, talking about the circumstances under which students are allowed to participate in graduation activities, and student behavior certainly being a part of that. That's often a very powerful motivator for seniors who might otherwise decide not to follow the rules as closely as they might otherwise, to make sure to keep it between the ditches before commencement ceremony. So there are a few things under there. including students that are under suspension at the time of commencement cannot participate in the graduation ceremony. So there are some things at our discretion that I'll just point out, but the things at the end talking about, and many of the parts of this policy are boilerplate from state law.
Any discussion on this policy? We'll start with Ms. Harrison, and we'll work our way down the table.
So the distinctions, I know you said they're from state law, and it says we shall develop procedures, and I don't necessarily need an answer tonight, but I'd like for you to, maybe before the second reading, to discuss whether we should add a bullet point that says maybe other honors as determined by the school system or something like that. It might be appropriate for, I'd like for maybe y'all to discuss that and see if that's something that.
So I'm clear, something that just suggests that we have the ability to recognize for other things beyond this?
Like
Sure.
like example would be Arlington, they have the PABE Academy, like, so that there
Sure.
could be other honors, distinctions, like All West could be a thing that we honor, or
Yeah.
something like that. There's lots of,
We can definitely do that. When we discussed this, we definitely didn't feel like this was a comprehensive
Okay.
list. We were saying the state says that they shall be recognized for these. I would anticipate any number of additional
Okay.
things, but if that additional language kind of gives us some, then we could certainly add that. Yep.
I just would like, I mean, even because, not that anybody goes and completely reads policy, but people might be interested in policy as we go into this new high school and everything.
Sure.
I'd like for it to be identified in some way, that there's more that, we want to draw attention to that is certainly.
I had something similar in mind, but then the only other thing is we have superintendent and not director of schools. Can we change line 19 to be superintendent, since we have it superintendent up earlier? That way nobody's confused. It's just one person. It's just you.
Absolutely. We always one or two. Deciding to go with superintendent in our policy manual has been the gift that keeps on giving,
It
because
is,
it
right.
is in every model policy, and sometimes we miss them, so
Well,
thank you.
like Ms. Harrison said, I wouldn't want somebody confused, like who's the director of schools? We know
Right.
it's the same person, but
Right.
Right.
casual readers of policy might not.
Sometimes I'd like to say,
Yeah,
not
like
me, I
us.
don't know. If you could find him, let me know. I'd like to talk to him too, 'cause he's got some explaining to do.
Any other comments on this policy?
Yeah,
I
go
do-
back.
I
Ms.
do have
Harrison.
one more.
Oh.
So the only question I have is, so it says students who have met all state graduation requirements and mandates by graduation date will be allowed to participate in graduation activities. Should it say something like subject to the things below? Because if you read that just as a sentence by itself, there are no caveats. I'm just, I mean, if you read that,
Sure.
you could just take it as.
I think that's a great note. Yeah, we can do that.
Burnett?
And just a question for me. I know that these, as you said, are in state law, but do we or should we also say what constitutes honor, state distinction? Or is that further down and I didn't read far enough?
No,
into the next-
it's not in there. It's in the state law, though.
Yeah.
It's quite, it would lengthen the policy quite a bit. We could certainly include that language, but it is referenced at the
It's in-
bottom.
yeah,
So, yeah,
okay.
it's defined.
That works for me.
Yep.
Maybe perhaps just a thought, put it in the student handbook.
Any other comments on this policy? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, again, this is just a first reading, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 6.306, interference, disruption of school activities.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, both 4 and 5 are updates based on changes in state law. They actually took effect January 1st. We are obviously under the state law already, but this is how we update our policies so that our policies reflect the state law. And they are entirely boilerplate.
Any discussion on this item? Be a revision.
revision.
So there's
Yep.
only one reading, okay.
Further discussion? All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 6.4081.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
This is a companion piece to the previous change that it also resulted from the same legislation.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of policy 6.702, student clubs, activities, and organizations. First reading.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This is a first reading of a new policy. I see Mr. Burnett's name beside it. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure, I'll start and then pass it off to Dr. Horrell. After the events of the recent months and the conversations we had with council, we're clearly made to understand that there's three types of clubs, right? That there's school-sponsored clubs, there's limited forum clubs, and then there's curricular clubs. And so we have policies about limited forum clubs. We have policies, I believe, on curricular clubs, but what we didn't have was a policy on school-sponsored non-curricular clubs. So I took this, this came directly from Williamson County Schools. See, I drafted, made some changes, sent it to Dr. Horrell. He made a few additional edits after we talked.
I will also,
Proposed policy.
if I may, I'll also clarify, Ms. Thomas had made a couple of notes about the footnotes, and we did actually clean up some of the things that she added to make sure that the footnotes reflected the appropriate Tennessee code annotated, and in some cases, United States code, and also she made a suggested reference to the Student Equal Access Policy 4.802.
And this is a first reading. Any discussion on this item? Ms. Harrison?
So, we had a discussion or whatever when, at our last meeting, where it said, I would ask, should, or discuss what the attorney kind of said as the school principal will assign, maybe not recruit, but assign might be. It wasn't. It wasn't a paid position or whatever. It would be an assignment by the.
I think the only distinction I would note is that I know that they cannot assign someone who
Disagrees with
who
it.
disagrees
Philosophically disagrees with,
philosophically.
right,
So
right.
assign might be too strong a word, and that may be
Okay.
why the recruit was used.
Okay.
Because there is a level of choice as opposed to typically when a principal says,
Right.
I assign you to teach this class, that's
Right.
it, you know.
Out of place there, and I don't disagree with the sign. I was just trying to figure out a word that better indicated. The attorney described it, so it didn't seem like it was a recruitment process, but.
Does it designate better? May be similar to assign,
Yeah.
however.
Designate?
It feels, yes, that doesn't sound like. On
Yeah.
page, what page am I on?
118 on page 2.
Page
Two.
number?
Yeah, you're on 2.
Yeah,
Well, recruit carries with it that a person would say no because of those philosophical differences. To assign or designate or appoint, that means go.
Lines 20 and 21 do say that the LSS employee would be approved by the principal. And it goes back to
just the way it sounded, it just didn't, just hearing last month, it just didn't sound like it was a recruitment process. Like that was the description. I was just really.
sounds a whole lot like. Turn this on, or is it already on?
I thought you're on.
I think designate sounds a lot like a point. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can word it, I think, to get the idea across that I mean, they could say the school, I mean, essentially, what are you gonna do, Dr. Horrell? Are you gonna ask someone to do it, or is like, how do you envision this working? Will a teacher ultimately volunteer for this, or will you ask a teacher to volunteer for it?
My guess, principals have different ways of doing things. If I were the principal, I would probably look around and see somebody that didn't already have an assignment, perhaps. They're not a coach or have a substantial extracurricular activity, and say, I need someone to monitor this new club. I can tell you what the club is. Do you have any objection to doing that? And I might say, you're going to be assigned to something. Do you have but unless you have a philosophical objection to this club, I'd like you to do this.
There's some funny synonyms for recruit, if you look it up, but, will engage an employee.
Identify.
Identify or even coordinate. I mean, essentially, you could take out the parenthetical and say the school principal will identify or coordinate a LSS employee to volunteer without additional compensation to serve. Take out the parenthetical and put in something like identify or coordinate. I think it accurately reflects what you just explained would sort of be your role in coordinating someone to do this.
I would move to make the amendments as Mr. Plumley suggested, to have line 18 now read, will identify a Lakeland school employee serve voluntarily without additional compensation to serve.
And we have a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're only on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? No discussion on the amendment. All in favor of approving the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment is approved, and we're back on the main motion, which is the new policy in its first reading. Ms. Thomas?
Can you elaborate on the final part of this about patriotic societies, and what the intent of that is? Because it's very, very vague and seems kind of wide open right now.
Yes, and based on your note of that, we did clean up and determine that the footnotes were incorrect, actually.
Okay.
And not specific enough.
Okay.
The patriotic societies are defined by federal law.
Okay.
I believe right now it may just be the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. This was law passed that basically requires schools to allow the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts to get up in front of elementary schools and speak for 10 minutes. And this has been in place. We implemented this when the law passed some time ago. I think
Okay.
Mr. Burnett correctly identified that we didn't have it in policy, although we were following the law. So if you go to those footnotes, TCA is the law, and it identifies patriotic societies as those listed under United States Code 36.
Okay.
So I think it's one of those where you don't want to get too specific in our policy because
It
there's
may
a couple
change.
of places it could change.
Okay.
Further comments or discussion on the policy? Hearing none, again, this is a first reading. We will vote again on it in March. All in favor of approving the policy, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of school support organization cooperative agreements from the Lady Lion Sideline Society and the Lakeland Prep Home Run Club.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
We've had a number, obviously, of new school support organizations that have come online in order to support the many additional opportunities that are being offered to our students, and these two have satisfied the requirements in terms of the paperwork that we require.
On this item, Ms. Harrison.
Were these groups able to participate in the school support organization meeting? Were they formed by that point, or any have officers at that point?
I know that the Home Run Club did.
Okay.
Not certain about the Sideline Society.
Let's explain what they are.
the Lady Lions Sideline Society is a girls soccer, basketball, I'm sorry, it is basketball. A girls basketball sport organization. The Lakeland Prep Home Run Club is a boys baseball. No,
Booster
it's
clubs
the
for
booster
those
clubs.
sports.
Any further comments or discussion? Mr. Burnett?
Just one quick question, because I can't read very well sometimes. I could read the name on the one, but couldn't on the Lakeland Lions Sideline Society. Who's this?
Madden.
Oh, okay. All right. Just curious. Thank you.
You got it on different paperwork than what we bring to you. We've got paperwork that lists all the officers, but it's not, it doesn't.
Any further comments or discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of FY 21-22 budget amendments.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, these fall into a few categories. If you'll give me just a. Issue with that link. Sorry, the one on the agenda works. Got it, thank you. Right, so we've got one that is a change to the budget for legal services. The board has approved some additional legal opinions on the club's discussion that we had, so there were some costs incurred for that, but most significantly, that's not the bulk of this, most significantly is because of these land transactions. Josh Lawhead with First Porter and Johnson, who I want to recognize for his hard work on 2 different land transactions over the last 6 months, has put in time beyond what we normally retain with Birch Porter and Johnson. So it did necessitate a budget amendment on the legal services category. You'll see under federal programs, it's not atypical to have small changes in those. You can see one for $32.78 under the SPDIG grant. The federal requirements do ask boards to update those on a regular basis. And then the other significant one is Fund 143, School Nutrition. You will see a number of changes there that mainly have to do with the extension of the community service for nutrition, in which every student, if they want to, can eat for free in our cafeteria. So basically that changes where the funds come from. So they come, instead of just being part of the regular breakfast and lunch program, they come from other USDA sources. So it's basically just accounting in those regards.
Comments or discussion on this item? And all in favor of approving the budget amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on the legislative agenda. I will note that, to my knowledge, there's no recommended changes for the legislative agenda. This is one that we just keep on there just in case once the session starts. There's a need to update. But if I can say, I know from talking to Ms. Childs that we don't have any recommendations. So.
Anything the board would like to discuss relating to the legislative agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Next item, number 10, is the signing of the boardmanship code of conduct by board members. Again, this is also one that just reminds us that this is something that the board members need to do, and publicly acknowledges that that's something that the board members are going to do on this night.
No action is needed on that item. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is the review of Policy Manual Section 5, first half.
Question on this item?
So actually, yes.
Mr. Burnett.
One item that came up that Dr. Horrell and I discussed was on item, on policy 5.2. Hearing officers will be maintained by the board and through as a casual policy reader and leading the entire first half of the section line by line. of who are they? And as Dr. Royal and I talked, realized that we hadn't updated that list in quite some time. Just for us to consider is, should we add a policy item that says we'll review that? Or leave it to the superintendent to make sure that we do update that list on a regular basis?
I could recommend, our annual agenda is a great tool and certainly reminds us to put things on the agenda. So if the board approved adding that item to the annual agenda, I agree, it needs to be updated. And we need to bring a new slate of individuals for the next board meeting, per my discussion with Mr. Burnett. But I think a motion to add that to the annual agenda would be probably most helpful, more so than having it in the policy.
Kristen?
I'll make a motion to add it to the annual.
Be clear, what do we add is for Ms. Millspaw? What exactly are we adding?
Approve the annual agenda next. But the annual appointment of the
Hearing
committee,
officers?
or
Yes, the hearing officers.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to add the annual appointment of hearing officers to our annual agenda. Ms. Millspaw, would you like to?
You need
I
it
think we can
annually.
look at it
Yeah.
and maybe see when there's another couple of committees we put in, we could do it maybe in junction. We can look at that.
I assumed you would want them to serve through the school year.
Yes,
It might have been during the summer.
maybe
but-
over the summer,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
There's no further business before.
There
Oh,
is.
there
We
is,
have
I'm
the
sorry.
amended-
I'm trying to do that. I do, thank you. Yes, our last agenda item is an update to the proposed LPS protected reading list, 122.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, we had a request from a teacher to add a book as an option for the 8th grade honor students to read, and that book is A Night Divided by Jennifer Nielsen. We have reviewed the summary. It seems in line both curricularly and in terms of content. There was not anything that I would deem to be objectionable, well-reviewed, of high literary value, and feel like it would be an enhancement to this teacher's curriculum.
Discussion on this item? Ms. Harrison?
So on some of them, we have designated accelerated Apex, Rich. Do we need to have a designation on this one? Is it advanced or enriched or rated? Do we need to have that designation?
I think that's probably in order. If y'all would allow me to add that administratively, I can get clarification, assuming the board approves it. Thank you.
No.
I certainly appreciated having not just the title, but the summary of the text. That was a great change that we've made. See that in advance.
There are comments or discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Dr. Horrell, is there any other business that needs to come before the board?
I have none. Oh,
Just have one request to add to next month's agenda, if appropriate to add at this time. So I would like for us to, at next month's agenda, talk about potentially nominating someone for like a TSBA Volunteer of the Year at the,
Talked about that earlier.
yeah, so I think it would be appropriate, with COVID we haven't been able to been in the best practice, but, renewing that practice where we were before COVID, so I'd like to have some discussion on that at our next agenda.
Dr. Horrell, will you make sure that's on our agenda in March?
we have, yes.
Thank you. Any other announcements need to come before the board?
I would like to announce that Nathan Harrison, in addition to being an all-West trombone player and all-around great guy, was very patient to hang out with us for the all of our board meeting tonight. Thank you, Nathan.
And
You
you were
should make
part
it
of you were part of our favorite thing all night, I have
That's
to
right,
say.
yeah.
You should make it a requirement for 8th grade student council president too, because that's what he is.
I'm not putting any more on Nathan Harrison, no.
To attend all of them.
All right, we're losing control here. Any other announcements, Ms.
So
Thomas?
I would just like to say, tonight was wonderful. I love watching the kids come and perform or just read something that they've written. So thank you to Ms. Lockhart, Ms. Vaught, and who else was out here with LES? Vogue was here,
Vogue was
yeah.
here, yeah.
And then to LPS for bringing the kids and brightening things up in here. It's always
Making us cry.
Yeah, yeah, it's always one of my favorites, so,
terrific.
thanks.
More announcements. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.